Hello, this is Professor Tom Wolf, and this is a presentation on the Java JOption pane dialogs. Today we're going to talk about JFileChooser. So these are widgets that are available in Java that make communicating with the user easier. And later on in Computer Programming 2, we're going to learn about GUI Programming, where we create a complete graphical user interface. We'll probably use Swing for that. We might get into the newer Java FX. But in addition to this way of creating a full-blown graphical user interface program, we have some sort of bridge widgets that allow us to use GUI elements in our non-GUI programs. I usually call those console programs. And these are all used to communicate with our users. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about JFileChooser. Pretty sure I have this material already in the Java lectures that talk about using files, the text files, but I wanted to break them out into little short ones that talk about the individual components. Thought that might be more useful. So we're going to talk about JFileChooser today. So JFileChooser is going to let the user select a file from the system using a graphical interface. And that means that they're not going to have to type a path or a file name for the file. And that's a big deal because, as you can imagine, it's very error prone. It's real easy for the user to make a mistake, type the name of a file that doesn't exist, or screw up the path. And in this way, they have to pick a file that's there, and it tends to not have any errors then. So here's the syntax for this. You can see that we have to import the JFileChooser, and that's part of the Swing library. And I'm going to point that out because we'll get into that again later. But if you look, it says import javax.swing JFileChooser. So everything after Java 1.1, starting with Java 1.1, pardon me, is called Java 2. And all of the libraries that were added start with Java X, or extended, instead of just Java, as we've seen. So the Swing library was added to Java, and it's the GUI programming mechanism for us to create these graphical user interface ones. So we're just going to use the JFileUser component. On the next line, you can see that I'm creating a JFileChooser object instance called chooser. So JFileChooser, chooser equals new JFileChooser. And then this other code isn't necessary, but you're going to want to use it every time because it's really helpful. So most of the time, I'm going to be writing this code in the context of a NetBeans project. And if you use this mechanism here to get the working directory, that will allow you to create any new files that you generate in your NetBeans project folder. Likewise, if you have an existing file that you want the user to read, it will be there. So that just turns out to be a lot cleaner for the programs that we work. So if you look here, you'll see file working directory equals new file system.getProperty user directory. So the file object can represent an individual file or a directory in the file system. Here it does. And user.dir, user directory, is the current directory for the application that's running. And that'll actually work outside of NetBeans too, but it just turns out that we can map it to NetBeans real nicely. Okay? Once I get that working directory, I'll tell the chooser to use that as the working directory. And so what that does is that saves a lot of pain, because normally this will open up on some system-defined directory like that really silly Microsoft Documents. So, you know, every program in Windows defaults to creating stuff in this one folder called Documents. And so that's a mess. If you want to do anything significant, you want to keep all your stuff organized, and that tends to disorganize it and create a sort of trash can where everything goes. So what this will do is it'll set the working directory, which the chooser will default to this project, which is going to be really awesome. Okay, now the next part of the syntax is a little bizarre, but basically what happens is when you show the dialog for the JFileChooser, which is this first part in the if statement. That's actually a command. So chooser.showOpenDialog will display the file chooser. That was going to return a symbolic constant value which tells us what the user did. And there's really two things here. The user can go ahead and approve, that is to pick a file, which is what this is testing for, or they can cancel the dialog. If they cancel the dialog, this will be false and there won't be any selected file. So assuming the user goes ahead and picks a file here, this will be true, and then the selected file, we can get selected file from the chooser, and then we can go ahead and open it. Notice this assumes that it's a text file here, so we're going to open it with the scanner to read it. Okay? So that's a little bizarre. I wanted to talk briefly about what this null is. Later on, when we look at Swing programming in Computer Programming 2, you'll see that this can be a JFrame object, which is part of our GUI. But because we're just using the chooser here and we don't have a GUI, that's null. There's nothing to refer to tie it to. So there's no existing GUI. So normally this would be a reference to the GUI that we're using. Okay, I think we're going to take a look at this now in NetBeans. Let's go ahead and do that. And you've seen this example before. This is my standard text file sample that shows you how to read and write text files. But I just wanted to show you how the code works in place. So again, I have the import for the JFileChooser. And then here's the code. I go ahead and create the JFileChooser. I call it chooser. I almost always use that name. You don't have to, of course. And now, I don't think this has to be in the try block. But when you try to open the file, that will have to be. So this code a lot of times ends up in the try block, even though it's not necessary. So here you'll see file, working directory equals new file, system get property user directory. That's going to grab the NetBeans project directory for this app. And then it's going to set that as the working directory for the JFileChooser. And then here is the code that checks to see if the user actually picked a file, and then if they did, we get the selected file from the chooser and we open it for reading as a text file. Now let's just real quickly look at the alternative here. So the else for this means that the user just canceled the dialog and didn't pick a file. So then we say cancel by the user, exiting, and we go ahead and close. Of course you could tell the program to loop until they actually do pick a file. Okay? Alright, let's run this real quickly. So here's the JFileChooser. By the way, let me stop. This is really important. For some reason, occasionally the JFileChooser will open up behind NetBeans. And so what happens is you can't see it. It's behind NetBeans, but it's actually running. And then what you have to do is you have to page through your apps or minimize them. In this case, it opened in front on top, and that's fine. Now notice that full text file sample is actually the name of my project directory, so I've successfully set that. And I'm looking for a file here called heroes.txt. What this program does is it reads a text file and then it writes it out as a numbered file. So I'll go ahead and hit open, and now it's going to ask me for the name of the file to write. Now since this doesn't exist, there's no really, you don't use the chooser, you just say here's the name of the file. So let's call this numbered heroes, and I'll put the .txt on there just because it'll be easy if I want to open it with Notepad or something else. It is a text file. No need to camel case this. Let's just make this all lowercase. So numbered heroes. So we'll hit OK. And so we can see that the program went ahead and read our heroes.txt file and put it to the console. It output it with the line numbers. And then if we look up here, we go to the files. There's our text file folder. There's the heroes.txt, and here at the bottom is the numbered heroes.txt. So if I double click that to open it in NetBeans, oh, that's interesting. It didn't write. Oops, looks like we have a little bug here. Okay, well, let's go and fix this real quick. So let's go back to Projects, Java. Oh, this is really funny. So you see how I'm writing this out here to the screen? I forgot to write it to the file. So there's a missing line of text here. You know, I corrected this in class, but this is my master, and the master didn't get this in. So instead of system out print file, this is going to be just out.print file. That's the name of my file. And I can use the printf function to do this. Let's see, I don't think we want the new line in there. If we put the new line at the beginning of the line, that would give me a blank line in the file. So let's change this a little bit and put the new line at the end of each line. Alright, let's run this again. I think we should be good now. And by the way, I'm going to write right over the numbered heroes. So I'll go ahead and get my heroes.txt with the JFileChooser. I'll hit open. And now I'll say numbered heroes.txt. Now, if you want, you can test to make sure that the user doesn't write over a file inadvertently. That's the default. So because I gave the same file name and I didn't program it to do this, it doesn't check. Once again, there's my console output. Let's go over here to Files. Double click on the, oops, we better close this because it might be a problem. We don't have the old version of the file open. There we go. So here's the numbered heroes text. It has all the data in it. So you can see that. And then again, I wanted to point out that here's my heroes.txt. It's in the project folder. That was my source file. And here's the file that I just created. So it's real handy to use the JFileChooser. It minimizes a lot of hassles that would happen if you had the user type in a file in. Okay, that's